A 47-year-old man named Edward Baldock is enjoying a night out with some mates at the Caledonian Club in Kangaroo Point, a suburb of Brisbane, Australia. At 1 a.m, he decides to call it a night and calls a taxi. Mr. Baldock waits outside the club, but is instead greeted by a car full of 4 young women. Heavily intoxicated and barely able to speak, he joins the women and enters the green Holden Commodore belonging to Tracey Wigginton, the driver. This is the last time the father and grandfather is seen alive. It's Psycho Sunday, and tonight, I'll introduce you to Tracey Wigginton, the Australian lesbian vampire killer. Tracey Wigginton grew up in the northern Australian coastal city of Rockhampton and lived through a dreadful childhood. She was adopted at the age of 3 by her grandparents, George and Avril Wigginton, who treated her appallingly. Not only did her grandfather sexually abuse her for several years, but her grandmother was also physically violent, repeatedly punishing the child by flogging her with the cord of a clothesline. Making her home life even more challenging, Wigginton claimed her grandparents were heavily into the occult. But while her childhood was marred by abuse, it was not one of poverty. Her grandparents were cashed up. George was a self-made millionaire thanks to a lucrative earth-moving business that drummed up an enormous number of government contracts. In fact, George was so well known in Rockhampton that the local council named a street after him. The Wiggintons were one of Rockhampton's most powerful and influential families. Imagine if the locals had known what went on behind closed doors. According to family friends who spoke to the media during Wigginton's trial, Avril detested her husband and spent her days doting on her beloved pet chihuahuas when not screaming abuse at her granddaughter. In her teens, Wigginton attended a prestigious private girls' school where her interests included playing the organ, ballroom dancing, and other girls. She was eventually expelled for molesting other girls, and she was sent to a Catholic convent school where she only lasted a few years. From an early age, Tracey was not allowed to have any friends and was forced to live in an adult's world. Journalists who managed to interview family members during the murder trial reported claims that she had been a large child who towered over her classmates, which would have added to her feelings of being an outsider. Her only friend was a chronically abused Michelle, who managed to run away from Avril's clutches by the time she was 15. Following the murder, Michelle told the media that her only regret was that she hadn't taken the then 8-year-old Tracey with her. In her early teens, Tracey was said to have been obsessed with the occult, mostly Ouija boards and tarot cards. In 1979, George died from cancer. Avril died in 1981, but not before she managed to persuade one of her male companions to take charge of the disciplining of Tracey. One incident involved Tracey fighting back and beating the man, who was hospitalized with head injuries. At 16, Tracey had an affair with a friend's husband, fell pregnant, and had an abortion. By the time she was 18, she was entitled to $75,000 her grandparents had left her, but she apparently frittered the money away on a motorbike and a lavish social life. Tracey, at 18 years old, was a very imposing figure. Not only did she dress like a biker, she was 6 feet tall and weighed around 15 stone. Her life went in rapid decline when she worked for a short time as a prostitute, stepped up her interest in satanic rituals, and began a love affair with a lesbian who went by the name of Sunshine, eventually marrying her in a civil ceremony. When Tracey turned 21, she inherited another $80,000 from her grandparents. This money was, once again, spent in record time. Tracey's union with Sunshine also didn't last, even though the couple had tried to have a child together. Tracey had a miscarriage. In 1989, when her relationship with Sunshine ended, Tracey struck up a friendship with 3 women who had common interests: the occult, vampires, and other women. The women were Kim Jervis and Tracey Waugh, both aged 23, and Lisa Paszynski, a 24-year-old and Tracey's lover. She's said to be obsessed with killing herself, a chronic self-harmer. Paszynski clocked up more than 80 visits to the local hospitals after slashing her wrists and attempting to overdose on pills. Most of these suicide attempts appeared to be of the attention-seeking kind. No matter how disturbed Paszynski might have been, there was never any doubt that Wigginton was a ringleader. On the night of 21st of October 1989, the four friends meet around 10 PM at Lemoore in Fortitude Valley to drink champagne and enjoy each other's company. Wigginton persuades the others to help her find a person to kill so she can drink their blood. And just 90 minutes later, they're cruising the streets for a victim. According to witness statements, Wigginton's three friends were very impressionable and had heard of Wigginton's vampire reputation for drinking the blood of animals, something Wigginton later denied. The four ladies jumped into Wigginton's green Holden Commodore at about 11:30 PM and start hunting the inner city streets for fresh blood, the music of Prince playing full blast on the car stereo. After the women pick up Mr. Baldock, Wigginton drives Mr. Baldock to Orley Park, leaving her friends in the car. She walks him to the banks of the Brisbane River. She then returns to the car and asks Paczynski to join her. As they return, Wigginton attacks Baldock with a large hunting knife, stabbing him in a frenzy that virtually severs Mr. Baldock's spinal cord. Paczynski quickly flees back to the car while Wigginton continues to stab Mr. Baldock repeatedly, inflicting 27 slashes to his face and neck. By the time the stabbing frenzy's over, Mr. Baldock has almost been decapitated. Wigginton then washes her knife, hands and arms in the nearby river. After the murder, the women go back to Jervis's flat, where Wigginton is in denial about the horrific crime, a fact psychologists claim indicates that one of her multiple personalities had killed Mr. Baldock. When Mr. Baldock's body is discovered the following day in the same place he fell, police find Wigginton's bank card stuffed inside his shoe, under his neatly folded clothes. The card is shoved all the way down towards the toe area, suggesting somebody has planted it there. Others believe that Mr. Baldock somehow got hold of the bank card and shoved it inside the shoe himself. According to Senior Sergeant Pat Glancy, he, by putting it in his shoe, helped us solve this murder. It was just an unbelievable clue. When officers pay Wigginton a visit, she admits she'd been near the river, but doesn't give any further information, and the officers hold off telling her that she's being questioned about a murder. At this stage, their interviewing is largely routine, prompted only by the discovery of a bank card at the scene of the murder. The officers believe a story at first because they find it very difficult to believe a woman is capable of such violence, even a woman as large and as strong as Wigginton, although there's evidence that following the death, somebody has placed their fingers in their wounds. Again, the officers don't believe that this is something a woman would do in the aftermath of a murder. According to the Australian Institute of Criminology, in 1990 to 91, only 10% of homicide offenders were female. But when police search Wigginton's car, the officers find a towel she'd used to wipe the blood from herself and a knife. At the same time, the erratic Paczynski had told some friends about the night's events, and they urge her to tell the police. Paczynski tells police about the murder, and she also tells police that she truly believes her lover is a vampire and has recently forced Paczynski to cut her hand so her lover could suck her blood. Police now have Paczynski's confession, and they arrest Wigginton, who gives officers every gruesome detail. But while Wigginton pleads guilty, she denies she identified as a vampire. Strangely, Wigginton recognises she is guilty, even though she claims to have no memory of the actual attack or losing her bank card. Wigginton tells police she buried her face in the victim's neck and drank his blood, but because all her friends were in the car, there were no witnesses to the alleged blood drinking. Wigginton goes on to tell officers that she felt nothing as she stabbed Mr. Baldock, even sitting down to smoke a cigarette while she watched him die. Wigginton said, "I walked around behind him. I took my knife out of my pocket. He asked me what I was doing. I said nothing and stabbed him. He went to grab my hand. I pushed his down, withdrew the knife, and stabbed him in the side of the neck. I stabbed him in the other side of the neck, and I continuously stabbed him. I then grabbed him by the hair on his head and pulled back, stabbed him in the front of the throat, and at that stage he was still alive." During the trial it emerged, not surprisingly, that Tracey Wigginton was mentally ill with multiple personality disorder. According to the medical experts, there were about 5 distinct personalities in Wigginton's head, 2 of which they saw as being capable of committing the murder. According to a psychologist's report, the personalities included Little Tracey, a childlike innocent personality, Big Tracey, a woman with severe depression, the Observer, a disconnected icy personality, Bobby, a frightening and brutal person, and Avril, the reincarnation of Wigginton's menacing grandmother. Bobby and Avril were seen as the most likely personalities to have taken hold of Wigginton's mind at the time of the murder. Wigginton was placed under hypnosis in a bid to work out the differences between her multiple personalities. When psychologist Dr. Chris Clark from the University of New South Wales invited Wigginton to describe the moment when she set eyes on a victim, Dr. Clark claimed her face quite literally changed in an instant, and she adopted the voice of Bobby and growled, "I want him." Wigginton was deemed fit to stand trial in January 1991. She pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. This has meant that under Queensland law, she'd receive life imprisonment. The trial lasted just 9 minutes. The trial of Wigginton's friends did little to examine the actual murder of Baldock, who became, like most murder victims, sidelined by the theatrical event. The women didn't take the stand, but the court was shown videotaped interviews conducted just days after their arrests, which covered everything from lesbianism to incest, vampirism, and satanic worship. Newspaper editors agreed that this was much more entertaining reading than what was going on in the Middle East. Pyshinsky was also convicted of murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment, but was released in 2008 when she had her application for resettlement leave approved by the Queensland Parole Board. She served 17 years behind bars and is kept out of the media spotlight since her release. Tracey Wigginton was released from prison in 2012 and is currently on parole. That brings us to the end of this week's Psycho Sunday. If you liked the video, please give it a like and let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for more videos. I just wanted to give a special thanks to Lex for helping me with the research of this video. It was a very challenging video to make for sure, because the person we're talking about is still alive and still out there. So we need to make sure that we have everything factually correct as best as possible. So I am purely making this video for entertainment purposes, based on fact, based on sources that we believe are trustworthy and reliable. However, if there are any issues with the video, please feel free to email me directly at thisismrreality@gmail.com and we can address any concerns you may have. I'll see you guys in the next one.